the purpose of my presentation is to create in you security consciousness, to make you citizens who know our security threats, the security environment better, and who can better and more clearly understand their role in the existing scenario. So I have divided this presentation into these topics: what is war and what is peace. Then 1,000 cuts, what is proxy war, neo-imperialism, the innocent traitor, crisscrossing of interests, who is a soldier, and how to train soldiers. Now, one by one, I will take these topics. What is war and what is peace? I say war is impossible, peace is war. Now, what does that mean? How is war impossible and how is peace war? War is impossible. On 20th July 1961, Herman Kahn, whose picture you can see here, established Hudson Institute, and its objective was to promote discussion and exchange of ideas on issues related to national security, which of course meant America's national security, human rights, foreign policy, economics, and domestic policy. In 1962, one Donald Brennan, defense and strategy analyst in that institute, gave a concept called mutual assured destruction, or MAD. What was mutual assured destruction? This concept said that if there is a nuclear war, then both countries or all countries involved in that war will be destroyed, they will perish. So war no longer is victory and defeat. War means total destruction of all participating countries. Now this doctrine MAD became a doctrine of deterrence. So what they started saying was, because of MAD now, the countries will avoid fighting, because war has become so destructive, so devastating, that nobody can afford to go to war. That's why I said war is impossible. What also happened because of this MAD doctrine was that it began to be used and is still used as a justification for nuclear buildup. So what is the philosophy behind that? The philosophy is, you cannot fight war, but you should make it sure that the other country doesn't attack you. So your power, your build-up, nuclear build-up should be so powerful that the other country would be scared of attacking you. So the result is, the concept of MAD, instead of making humanity saner and bringing about an understanding that nuclear weapons should be dismantled, it has resulted in bigger and bigger and bigger build-up of more and more dangerous weapons. On the heels of the MAD doctrine came the concept of first strike, second strike. So whoever gives the first strike gets an advantage. One result of the devastating nature of nuclear war has been the development of interceptor missiles. Now war is also shifting to the space. So the war scene is becoming more and more complicated, more and more complex, more and more devastating, but war now seems to be almost impossible. So if war is not possible, then how should the countries balance their equations? how do you become bigger than the other country? For that, the solution, very beautiful solution, is you convert the other country's peace into war. Don't let him be peaceful. How do you do that? In 1965, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was addressing the United Nations Security Council, and he said Pakistan would fight a 1,000-year war against India. And he also said something else. He said Pakistanis would eat grass to keep up with India. Now, this 1,000-year war could not become a reality because in 1971, Pakistan was divided into two countries, the present day Pakistan and Bangladesh. So the present day Pakistan got truncated. It did not any longer possess the manpower and financial resources to match up with India. So they developed another strategy. General Ziaul Haq and his team of strategists developed a new strategy of bleed India with 1,000 cuts. What happens when a person receives multiple cuts? There is bleeding resulting in death. So the idea was you cause so much and such extensive damage within India that India dies, it collapses. So this is what they started, and as a part of that strategy, Pakistan started promoting insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, Northeast. They started promoting communal tensions and terrorism in India. Pakistan sponsored Khalistan movement, caused a lot of damage in my native state, Punjab, during 1980s and 1990s. ISI sponsored Khalistan 2, which was tried in 2020, and they used the farmers' agitation as a front end. Fortunately, the government at the center has been able to handle that very effectively, but Pakistan has been trying every which method to weaken India by its strategy of 1,000 cuts. China promotes Naxalite type of activity in India. China promotes insurgency in the Northeast. China promotes divisive tendencies within India. So all this has been going on. The idea is you create a proxy war. So what is proxy war? Proxy war is that you don't send your soldiers, you send somebody else. You create what are known as non-state actors. So during Ziaul Haq's period, they started creating non-state actors, the Talibans and others. So they were given training by the military, by the ISI, but they would come and mingle with the common public. It would be difficult to identify them. They were not wearing uniforms. They were not coming as Pakistani soldiers. So this new type of war called proxy war is what is becoming now the new method of fighting wars. What is neo-imperialism? Unlike what happened in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, etc., when countries went and occupied other countries, now what they try to do is to take over the economy of the other country. Especially China has been doing this in a very, very systematic manner. China is straining India's financial resources by a build-up at the border. So China has huge financial resources. They have big army. So what they are doing is, China is not going to have a war with India because that would be very destructive for China itself. So what does it do? They start a build up along the border. Now to counter that build up, India has also to take similar steps. But India, whose economy has been badly battered by the COVID situation, it has to strain its financial resources, but at the same time they can't afford to leave the borders also unguarded. What is the result? The result is a lot of money has to be pumped into the protection of the northern border of India. So this is how countries like China especially, China is a neo-imperialist country. China is trying to capture several other countries economically. China floods a country with cheap products and destroys its local industries. Another thing they do is they use the vulnerability of corrupt officials of different countries to get projects there. They plant gadgets to control the data and information systems of the country. For example, Philippines, for example, they put up a traffic control system. Now, what they do through those gadgets, they will also keep collecting data of those countries. And when that data reaches China, China is able to plan its strategies in a very intelligent way. So, these are all threats that India faces today. Another thing that China does is, because China's economy today is huge, so they give loans to countries and then they make it a condition that that country has to carry out those projects with Chinese contractors. Now when the Chinese contractors go there, they make profit and they also begin to become like local citizens there. For example, now in Pakistan, China has made big inroads. First China gave loans, then they sent their engineers, the local people started learning Mandarin. So this is how slowly China is entering Pakistan, and China also creates debt traps for these countries. The countries are not able to pay back, so then China is able to control the economy of those countries. So this is what is neo-imperialism, in which China is acting in the most aggressive manner. So who should be the soldiers in this type of a proxy war? Because this war is not fought on the border. The nurse in a remote village is a soldier, because when she does something to prevent the spread of COVID, she is making her contribution towards making the country stronger. Because what we need is a strong country, a country which is economically stronger, economically strong. So the nurse in a remote village, a school teacher is a soldier. Dr. Malini, your dean here, she is a dean, isn't it? Registrar, joint registrar. She is a soldier. How is she a soldier? She is the wife of a senior officer. She could have enjoyed her life. She didn't do that. She developed her talent. So those people who develop their talent, who try to grow as persons, they become soldiers of the nation. A good YouTuber is a soldier because he is spreading messages, he is making analyses. So he is a soldier. A good press reporter is a soldier, someone who takes correct news, not fake news, because he is creating awareness. He is exposing people who work against the country. So he is a soldier. A scientist at ISRO is a soldier. Industrialists and industrial workers are soldiers. Farmers are soldiers. So these are the people, and billions of others. So these are all the people who are building the country. Then there are people who could be called traitors, although traitor is a very strong word to use, but using it in a very mild manner, we can say these are all innocent traitors. They do not know that they are working against their own country, and they are assisting the enemy country in defeating their own country. Who are these people? The enthusiastic youngster lured by great international movements. You know who I might be talking about. Somebody sitting somewhere running a particular movement, and this youngster here who doesn't understand things in their full perspective gets attracted, starts speaking their language, and says things which go against her or his own country. So it's not that he or she is doing it out of any bad feeling, but there is a big movement and that enthuses him or her. The troller who enjoys hurting others. This is becoming a trend in our society today. Trolling, say hurting comments, speak against the Prime Minister, speak against this person, that person. The result is that these trollers create a very negative atmosphere in the country, which goes against the interests of the country. Because what we need to understand today is that we are not working in an environment which is restricted to the country. India of today is no longer the India of 1980s or 1990s. It's a different country now. The entire world is interconnected. The immature thinker, there are millions of them. They don't study, they don't think properly, they don't think deeply, but they think that they have the right to say whatever they feel. So it's not their fault. The fault lies with our system, which does not produce good thinkers. Our education system, for example, how much of thinking skills is taught by our system? That's what we need to question. The morally and financially corrupt person, because these are the people who weaken the society. They create a kind of internal cancer within the society and weaken the country. The power seeker, because the power seeker is not interested in anything else. He is only interested in his or her attaining power. The fraudster, because such a fraudster demolishes the system. Such a fraudster attacks the credibility of the systems. The false reporter and the dirty filmmaker. This is becoming a trend. Add sex to everything, add dirt to everything, promote drinking, promote gundaism, because that is what brings them money. So this is where the interests of these people harm the interests of the nation. One problem is that there is a crisscrossing of interests in today's world, because today's world is so much connected that interests begin to crisscross. There is emotional and cultural link beyond boundaries. For example, the Tamilian sitting here feels culturally and emotionally closer sometimes to someone living in Malaysia or Singapore. Someone sitting in Punjab might feel emotionally and culturally closer to Pakistani, because he might enjoy the Pakistani Punjabi music more than he might enjoy Kannada music. So these are some of the realities of our life that we must take into account. Affinities with an international religious identity, religious identities go beyond the boundaries. So particular religion spread over so many countries. So what happens is, when something is planned based on religion in a country which is not a part of India or is against India, it might find an echo with some people, not all, but some people of that religion living in our country. There are regional versus national interests problems, this region versus that region. Mutual suspicions are there sometimes. And there is a clash between personal and national interests. Somebody would like to grow in a particular manner, but then that growth is going to harm the interests of the nation. There are non-resident Indians, they contribute so much to the country, so they also feel that they should have a say in our country, with the result that ideas and movements which may not be healthy for us begin to get controlled by people who may be Indians but who are not now a part of the Indian land mass. Then we are a country with multiple identities. So there is so much diversity. So all these are factors which result in certain types of pressures and stresses which need to be countered. So finally, I come to the conclusion of my lecture, and that is, in this entire complex situation, who should be the soldiers and how should they be trained? One thing I would say is the objectives of this course is one way of training the soldiers. This course is oriented in such a way that you are going to produce soldiers for the country. You are going to produce youngsters who are conscious of their duty, conscious of their role, who are conscious of the problems faced by the country. Then spread the message of this presentation. The message of this presentation is understand the complexity of the situations and try to counter the negatives wherever you can. Create a culture of excellence and hard work. Let us produce thinkers, scientists, geniuses. Let us create a culture of excellence. Let us try to be excellent, not just because it will get us a good job or it will help us earn money. We should enjoy being people of talent, people of qualities, people who achieve. So we should be achievers. Clichés won't serve. Let us be models to others. We exchange so many clichés. You open the WhatsApp and every third message is a sermon. So that's not going to help. We should become models for others. Let us indulge in positive criticism rather than fun making. Fun making is becoming our national preoccupation. Everybody is interested in stand-up comedy, and in that stand-up comedy, what they will say, there is no limit. Let us have good humor, let us have genuine humor, let us have intelligent humor. Focus should be on cultivating intelligence. This is a country of rishis, we must keep that in mind. Finally, I would say, let us do our bit. What does that mean? Let us do our bit. We always find fault with others. This man is not doing this, that man is not doing this, the Prime Minister doesn't do this, the Home Minister doesn't do this man is useless, that man is useless. Let us not have that type of an approach. Let us look at ourselves and see what we can do. So, I have finished whatever I wanted to say. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Thank you very much.